For years, the name Dr. Joel Tudman carried weight and admiration in pulpits and faith circles. People saw him as a man of power, full of purpose and wisdom, someone whose voice could move hearts and change lives. He had the look of confidence, the charisma of a born leader, and the presence of a man chosen by God. But behind the polished image, there was a story that no one truly knew. There were whispers that came and went, quiet talks among those close to him, small hints that maybe everything wasn't as perfect as it seemed. You won't believe how deep those whispers went and what they were trying to hide. Let me tell you, what appeared to be a life of complete blessing was slowly being eaten away by silence, distance, and secrets that were never meant to see the light. Dr. Tudman had built a strong image, a faithful husband, a powerful preacher, and a respected leader. He inspired crowds, traveled across the country, and carried himself like a man with everything under control. His wife was always beside him, smiling through every sermon, supporting him through every challenge. Together they looked unstoppable, the picture-perfect example of love and leadership. But here is the shocking part. Behind those public smiles, cracks were forming. The same man who brought hope to others was struggling quietly at home. There were nights when his wife waited for him to return, only to find herself sitting alone, staring at the clock, wondering if she still held a place in his busy world. The truth was, the more his name grew, the more his heart drifted. The lights, the followers, the endless invitations, they all came with a cost. He became busier, more distracted, and less present. What makes this story different is that it didn't start with betrayal or scandal. It started with silence. The kind of silence that grows slowly, one missed dinner at a time, one avoided conversation at a time, until two people who once prayed together began to feel like strangers in their own home. She tried to understand. She told herself it was just the pressure of ministry, the weight of leadership, and the demands of being a pastor. But deep down, she knew something was changing. The warmth was fading, and the laughter that once filled their home was being replaced by quiet exhaustion. She later shared that she could feel herself disappearing behind his calling. Everyone saw her as the pastor's wife, graceful, calm, and supportive, but no one saw the woman who was slowly breaking inside. The craziest part was how well she learned to hide it. She smiled for the cameras, attended church events, and stood proudly beside him while her heart grew heavier by the day. You see, this is how distance works. Now, it doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it just creeps in softly until one day you wake up and realize the person sleeping next to you feels like a memory. As his ministry grew, so did the expectations. He had sermons to write, meetings to attend, people to counsel, and cities to visit. Every time she asked for a moment of peace together, he would say, "Just a little longer." God is still building something. But what neither of them realized was that while God was building his platform, their foundation was quietly cracking beneath them. She stayed quiet, loyal, and patient, thinking love and faith would be enough to fix it. But destiny took an unexpected turn, because no matter how strong faith is, it can't heal what you refuse to face. And the things they both refused to confront, the loneliness, the pride, the silence, were beginning to destroy what they once promised to protect. As months turned into years, the distance between them became a pattern. He grew quieter, more distracted, and emotionally distant. There were moments when he came home and sat in complete silence, not out of anger, but out of emptiness. She wanted to reach for him, to ask what was wrong, but the fear of another cold response kept her still. She prayed quietly, hoping that God would fix what she could not say out loud. And while the world continued to see a strong, powerful preacher, his wife saw the man behind the sermons, tired, lost, and slowly slipping away. But She didn't give up. She believed that this was only a phase, that somehow their love and faith would pull them through. Yet, as we all know, silence can be more dangerous than words. It hides pain until it becomes unbearable. And soon, her quiet endurance would turn into the confession that shook the faith community to its core. Because what she revealed later wasn't just emotional, it was raw, real, and something no one saw coming. It was one evening after service when everything began to shift. The congregation had just finished a powerful worship session, and people were coming up to Dr. Tudman, thanking him for the message that had changed their lives. He smiled, hugged a few people, and said all the right words. But the truth, he couldn't feel any of it anymore. The same man who once preached with fire now felt empty inside. He had mastered the art of performing faith while quietly losing himself behind it. His wife noticed it before anyone else did. She could tell that his spirit wasn't the same. The passion in his eyes had faded, and even his prayers sounded rehearsed. It was as if he was speaking to everyone but God. That night, as they drove home, the silence between them was louder than ever. The car was filled with unspoken thoughts. She finally gathered the courage to say, "Joel, are you happy?" He looked at her for a moment, confused by the question. Then he said softly, "I don't even know anymore." That one line broke her. She realized he wasn't just distant from her, he was distant from himself, the fame, the ministry, the expectations. They had taken something sacred from him. He wasn't the man she married anymore. He had become a version of himself that was living for everyone else but his own soul. As days passed, the situation worsened. He started spending more nights at the church, calling it preparation time. But deep down, it was escape. He didn't know how to talk to her, and she didn't know how to reach him. Their home felt like a waiting room filled with two people pretending that nothing was wrong. Then came the moment that changed everything. When a close family friend accidentally let slip that Dr. Tudman had been seen often with someone from his ministry team, a young woman who was always around him, helping with events and travel. At first, his wife refused to believe it. "Not Joel," she said. "He's too devoted to let something like that happen." But denial has a short life. She started noticing things. The late night messages, the phone calls he took in another room, the unexplained trips that suddenly became urgent ministry work. Her heart sank deeper with every passing day, and she began to live in quiet torment, torn between suspicion and hope. She still prayed for him every night, asking God to protect his heart and bring him home emotionally. But the truth was, he had already left long before she ever realized it. One morning, she found his phone buzzing on the nightstand while he was in the shower. Normally, she would never touch it. But something inside her, maybe pain, maybe fear, made her pick it up. What she saw confirmed everything she had been denying. There were messages, long conversations that didn't belong between a pastor and a church assistant. Words of comfort, emotion, and connection, the kind he hadn't shared with her in months. Her hand shook as she read them, but what hurt most wasn't betrayal. It was realizing that another woman now knew the version of him she had been missing, the one who laughed, who cared, who listened. When he came out, she couldn't even speak. The tears in her eyes said it all. He looked at her, froze, and understood immediately what had happened. The truth that had been hiding behind silence finally broke free, and there was no going back. That night turned into hours of confrontation, tears, and words they could never take back. He admitted he had lost his way, that he didn't mean for it to happen, but he couldn't deny the emotional bond he had formed. She listened quietly, her heart breaking with every word. And yet, instead of anger, she felt something unexpected. Sorrow, not just for herself, but for him. She could see how far he had drifted from the man of God he used to be. She realized that the affair wasn't just about temptation. It was about emptiness, about losing touch with purpose and peace. And though the betrayal cut deep, part of her still wanted to save him. She said quietly, "You're fighting something bigger than us, Joel. You're fighting yourself." Those words stayed with him. For the first time in years, he looked at his life and saw it clearly. The ministry that had become a mask, the marriage that had become a memory, and the faith that had become routine. It was the beginning of his breaking point, because sometimes before you can be redeemed, you have to be completely undone. After that night, nothing was the same. The truth had been spoken, but healing didn't come right away. It rarely does. The house that once felt alive with love and laughter now carried the weight of regret and silence. Every room seemed to echo with memories of what they used to be. Dr. Tudman tried to apologize, tried to explain himself, but words felt too small for the damage that had been done. He moved around the house like a shadow, quiet and distant, while his wife carried herself with quiet strength, holding back tears that only God saw. She still went to church, still smiled at people, still played her role, but inside, she was trying to figure out how to forgive a man who had broken her trust but still held her heart. For the first few weeks, he avoided the pulpit. He said he needed time with God, but the truth was he didn't know if he even deserved to stand there anymore. The guilt ate at him every single day. He spent long hours alone, reading his Bible, crying silently, asking how he had gone from preaching about righteousness to living in hidden sin. He remembered the faces of people who looked up to him, the countless lives he had encouraged, and now he wondered, what would they think if they knew the truth? That behind the sermons and scriptures, he had become the very thing he once warned others about. But even in his brokenness, something strange began to happen. For the first time in a long while, he felt real. There was no spotlight, no expectations, no applause, just him and his truth. The weight of pretending was finally gone. His wife noticed the change too. She saw the tears, the late night prayers, and the quiet repentance that filled their home. And though her heart was still torn, she couldn't ignore the fact that something in him was shifting. He wasn't hiding anymore. He was finally facing himself. One night, he came to her, sat down quietly, and said, "I don't know how to fix this, but I don't want to lose you. I can't undo what I've done, but I can become the man you used to believe in." It wasn't a grand apology, but it was honest, and honesty was something she hadn't seen from him in a long time. She didn't answer right away. She just looked at him, seeing both the man who hurt her and the man she had prayed for. Then she said softly, "If you want to rebuild, it can't be for the world. It has to be for God and for us." That was the turning point. It wasn't easy. They started counseling, prayed together again, and slowly began to talk about the pain instead of avoiding it. But even as they tried to heal, the outside world started catching on. People noticed his absence from the pulpit. Rumors started swirling, small at first, then growing louder. Church members whispered in the hallways, some saying he was taking a sabbatical, others claiming there was more to the story. The pressure to address it publicly became too heavy to ignore. He knew it was time. One Sunday morning, he stood before the congregation, not as the confident preacher they once knew, but as a man stripped of pride. His voice trembled as he spoke. He didn't name details, but he didn't hide behind excuses either. He confessed to failing both God and his family, to losing sight of what truly mattered. The room fell silent. Some cried, others bowed their heads, and some couldn't believe what they were hearing. But in that silence, something sacred happened. His confession didn't destroy his ministry. It humanized him. It showed that even the strongest leaders can fall, and that grace is not for the perfect, but for the willing. That day, his wife sat quietly in the front row, tears rolling down her cheeks. It wasn't pain anymore. It was release. For the first time, she saw him not as the man who hurt her, but as the man who was finally free from his own chains. The road to healing was still long, but something real had been restored that day: truth. Still, what no one knew was that this public confession would open the door to a storm neither of them expected. Because when truth comes to light, not everyone responds with grace. Some people forgive, others judge, and the aftermath of that moment was only just beginning. In the weeks following his confession, life for Dr. Joel Tudman and his wife changed in ways they could never have imagined. The church community that once cheered for him now stood divided. Some saw his honesty as strength, while others whispered behind closed doors, saying he had failed his calling. The same people who once sought his prayers now avoided his eyes. Every time he stepped outside, he could feel the weight of judgment pressing down. It was humbling, even painful, but for the first time, he didn't run from it. He accepted it. He knew this was the consequence of living with hidden truth, and if redemption meant walking through the fire, then he was willing to do just that. His wife, on the other hand, carried her own storm quietly. People looked at her with pity, some even questioning why she chose to stay. But what they didn't understand was that her decision wasn't weakness, it was strength. She saw something in him that others couldn't. She saw the man beneath the mistake, the broken heart behind the failure. And though she still carried scars from the betrayal, she chose to believe that healing was possible, not because it was easy, but because grace demanded it. Together, they started rebuilding not just their marriage, but their faith. Slowly, he began preaching again, but this time his sermons were different. Gone were the perfectly polished words and the rehearsed emotions. Now, when he spoke from a place of pain, truth, and renewal. He told people that grace wasn't meant for the perfect, but for those who dared to fall and rise again. People could feel the change in him. His voice carried weight not because of authority, but because it came from experience. He no longer preached as a man above sin, but as one who had wrestled with it and survived. And it was through that brokenness that his ministry found a new purpose. Couples started reaching out to them, sharing their own struggles, finding comfort in their story. His wife began speaking to women about forgiveness and the power of prayer during heartbreak. What once looked like the end of everything slowly turned into a testimony that began healing others. Together, they turned their pain into purpose. But even as they grew stronger, there were nights when memories returned, moments when silence filled the room and old wounds whispered again. Healing, they learned, wasn't a one-time event. It was a daily choice. A choice to love again, to trust again, to keep walking, even when the past tried to pull them back. And in those moments, they leaned not on each other's strength, but on God's. Because sometimes grace doesn't erase the past. It simply gives you the strength to live beyond it. Years later, when people spoke of Dr. Joel Tudman, they no longer saw just the scandal or the shame. They saw redemption. They saw a man who had fallen but didn't stay down. A husband who learned to listen again. A leader who found his faith not in success but in surrender. His story became a living reminder that failure doesn't disqualify you. It reveals how deeply grace can reach. And as for his wife, she once said in an interview, "People think forgiveness is about setting the other person free, but truth is, forgiveness is what sets you free." Those words define the rest of their journey. They were no longer the picture-perfect couple people admired. They were something far more powerful. They were real, broken, restored, and forever changed. In the end, their story wasn't about a man who lost everything. It was about a man who lost himself and found God again in the ruins. A story that reminded everyone watching that no matter how deep the fall, redemption is always possible if you're willing to face the truth, no matter how painful it may be.